to another Coach Dave Academy lap guide with myself, Kieran Harrison. Once again, we're in the BMW M4 GT3, and it's for week 11 of the IMSA iRacing series at Montreal. So without further ado, let's get started.
You have about 1 lap of fuel left. That was your fastest lap of the session.
So that was the full speed lap around Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in the BMW M4 GT3. I'm now at the start finish line of the replay of that lap, and I'm going to talk you through everything you need to know about the lap. So just starting here, heading towards turn 1. You can see that I'm sort of starting just before the start finish line. I'm sort of just left to the middle of the track. It's just to open up this right curve a bit. I don't think you need to go all the way, but just opening it up a bit allows you to be straight when you hit the braking zone. Which my reference for that is this tarmac runoff. So there's 3 little bits of escape road, I guess is a better word for it. And at the start of the second one is my braking reference, really, just about as the front gets in line with it. All the way down from 5th to 2nd for this one, trail braking in, because of course we're trying to turn as we're still slowing quite a lot for this one. You can take all of this red and white curb, and then I take a little bit behind it, but you've got to be careful that you don't overdo it because it can ground the car out when you come back over the curb. As long as you're pretty much off the brakes as you go over it, the car flows over it quite nicely, as I did here. Possibly on this occasion carrying a little bit too much speed. I would ideally like to be a little further left here. By the time I start to brake more, like maybe car's width further to the left. And then as we get back on the brakes, it's just a short little blip of throttle in between. So you can see just there, I'm getting on the throttle a little bit and then off it again straight away. That's just a blip for downshift. I think I'm actually probably in 3rd through here and then down to 2nd for the second part. And I kind of treat this as a bit of a double apex corner. So the first part you get a little bit of the curb and then you run out and then you come back. You can see on this occasion I don't get quite back. I think I run out a little bit too far wide in the middle of the corner. Ideally you'd want to be a bit closer to this red and white curb, but don't sit on it the whole way around. You want to be as close as you can on the exit without actually hitting it. But anyway, getting a good exit kind of saved the lap time here. You can see I got on the power quite progressively and then to full throttle once I'm confident it's going to grip. And then for the next one, another chicane. My reference is I'm looking at the 1 board but braking sort of when I think I'm about halfway between the 2 marker boards, the 2 and the 1. You can see just there, sort of, if anything, slightly closer to the 1 board from the onboard position since you sat near the front of the car. For this one, you're in 4th and you're going down 2 gears, down to 2nd. It's important not to downshift and brake too aggressively here, especially when you're going into 2nd, because you can get a little slide on, and then that really affects both your speed through the corner and then the traction you get on the exit. So I don't find that you can take all of this red curb behind, but you can see here I just dip my wheels behind. I think that's pretty much the sweet spot to do, because if you take any more of it, as I said in the first corner, you end up grounding the car out as you bounce back over the curb. But if you take just this sort of amount, it almost pulls the car around without having that terrible bouncing as you get back on the track. You see it bounces quite nicely over the curb there. Just make sure you're not on the brake as it happens. And then we're cutting this left part just a bit. You can see there's almost sort of, it might be difficult to work out on the video, but there's where my mouse is sort of the edge of this first layer of grass, and then there's another layer. And I think that probably determines where you would get an off track or a slowdown if you put your left wheels beyond that. But you can take 2 wheels on it and you still get pretty good traction. I'm staying in second really for as long as I can instead of short shifting to third. I just find it easier to be more consistent with the traction and just being progressive with the power. We're not to full throttle until pretty much I'm confident I'm not going to hit the wall. But of course getting as close as we can to it. Then through this part it's flat out kink, but it is important to turn in once and commit to it and get as close to the inside as you can, because although it's easily flat, if you're slightly wide, you end up further to the left on the exit, and then you've got more ground to cover to get back across to the right for the following corner. And my reference for this one, I don't really have a specific reference. I'm more looking at where the tarmac darkens. You can see up ahead, but actually it's pretty much in line with the end of this wall. Just going past it, just gone past that wall on the left there, and then we're starting to brake. Again for this one, down to second gear, trail braking in. We want to try and get a bit of a late apex for this one, because you want to open up the following corner to get as good of an exit as you can, because it's a bit of a back straight. Don't go behind the curb on this one. It's much like the 2 corners I've already mentioned that are similar to this, but I find this one to be even more severe in terms of it bounces the car out and you just lose more time than you gain. But trying to get back a little bit to the left before we turn into this following right. I take all of this curb that I can. And again, just being nice and steady on the throttle before finally going to full throttle when I'm confident I can A, not hit the wall, and B, not lose the rear end with some wheel spin. Then just on this back straight, just trimming down the length of the track. I mean, it's a marginal gain, but you might as well take anything you can. Then fading back over to the left-hand side for the next chicane. I'm looking at the sort of the 2 board and the bridge really, and braking maybe 2 or 3 car lengths before we get there. So you can see I'm just starting to brake now, which is just a little bit before this 2 board, and then still letting the car drift to the left-hand side, and then returning point is pretty much as we're going past this 1 board and just before this runoff ends and the grass starts. And this is one of them. This is where the questionable track limit starts really. So with this one, I believe the track limit is if your left wheels are on the red and white curb, you're fine basically. If you go onto the white curb with your left wheels, you get a pretty massive slowdown. So you definitely want to avoid that. But anyway, if you cut, of course, you can see here that I could have taken a little bit more. But what I found with that in this particular corner is the car would then bounce even more because it's quite a steep curb. So I think the front splitter was probably bouncing off the curb and then it jumps the car out. So what you really want to do is get your right wheels onto the bulk of the curb. That's what I'm aiming to do. And it still turns the car out, but because there's so much curb that you can take, it opens the corner up sufficiently to still make it faster. And then for this following part, pretty much getting the left wheels just onto the left side of the slope of this big white curb, and then onto this escape road on the exit. It just sort of narrows down the angle of the exit of the corner, which makes it much easier to get onto the power. You can see it as I'm on the curbs, I'm being quite careful on the power. I'm never going to full throttle while I'm going over them. Off again, and then back on again as we get off the curb. I think again with this one you can take even more than this without the track limit violation. I think that if your right wheels were still on this red and white curb, you'd be fine. But I think the curb is sizable enough that you would ground out, and then you would just sort of wash out wide. So you want to take as much as you can without the floor bottoming out too much, and then again taking as much space as we can before hitting the wall on the exit. And now heading into the hairpin. Your main objective before braking for this point is to make sure you're already pointing in a straight line. So you've got to finish your left turn here from going around that flat out bend just before you start braking. And the point you're looking for is just before this 2 board. There's this sort of escape road bit, and just in line with where it ends is pretty much exactly where I want to brake. That's the reference I was looking at. And once we're in line with that, I'm starting to brake. And I do use first for this corner. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can see on this lap, I sort of take a single late apex and just trying to focus on the traction as much as possible, because obviously we're going from very low speed onto the big straight. But you could also get into this first apex a bit sooner and then really slow down on the apex and then fire out. And it works out about the same. You would gain time in the corner that way, but then lose some of it back on the straight. But obviously that does allow for some overtaking opportunities either way. If somebody else prefers this wider line, you could quite easily stuff it up the inside, and if you got it stopped on the apex, then block pass basically, you're going to get the position and there's nothing they can do. So again, really focusing on trying to get as good an exit as possible here. So I'm straightening the car out. You can see my throttle input. I'm very patient on the throttle, and then I go just trying to stay out with the traction control, because that really kills the exit, trying to get as close to it as I dare without actually engaging it. And then the final chicane, I actually think this is the most difficult bit on the track, and I hate when tracks have the most difficult corner last, because if you're on a good lap, you're feeling all the pressure, and then you've got the most difficult corner. But again, it's a bit of a track limits situation where you just got to try and take as much as they allow. You can see this 3 board here. I'm braking. It feels like I've just gone past it as I'm starting to get on the brakes. So you can see I'm starting to brake just as the rear of the car is going past the board. Down to second gear for this, and what you want to do is you almost want to delay your turn in slightly, because if you turn in too early and take the right amount of curb, it fires the car out and it sometimes gives you a slowdown. What I'm aiming to do is turn in relatively late, just as we're going past this 1 board, and then I'm targeting putting my left wheels on the red and white curb. So obviously the rest of the car is then way over the white curb, as you can see here. And then the same in the second part, getting the right wheels right up on this red and white curb. The track limit for the slowdown, I think again, as mentioned in some of the previous corners, is if you get your outside wheels onto the white sort of sausage curb bit, that gives you a slowdown. So you want to get as close as you can to that really without getting it. But the advantage of taking the curbs this much is I actually found that the more you attack this first one, the more it opens up the second one, and it also allows you to take the second one on a bit of a shallower line, so you're coming at less angle coming out the corner, which just helps with the traction on the exit. But that's really the key, trying to get these curbs and trying to get the car to react consistently over it, which is something I've tried to help out with the setup I've made for this track. But then, as you can see, the car lands quite nicely on this occasion as I come off the curb. It just clips this white curb on the way down and then sits, and I can just get flat out at that point, because I've managed to open up the corner enough. And then running all the way out to the wall, and on this lap guide, I'm just shortening the distance to the line. This is what you would want to do in qualifying rather than the race. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the lap. So there we have it. That was the complete lap guide around the Montreal track in the BMW GT3 for week 11 of the IMSA iRacing series. The key thing with this track is just trying to, I mean, there's 2 really, but they go hand in hand, is trying to take advantage of those track limits as much as possible, because there's so much time to be found by doing that, and also trying to use the curbs as much as you can without hurting yourself too much, basically. And that's particularly true in the final chicane in particular. But yeah, if you are interested in anything else Coach Dave offer, we do loads of other lap guides, and we do setups for a variety of cars across iRacing and ACC. Please check out the website or the Discord for any information you may need about any of those services. But that's it from me for the season, actually. So I'll see you next time.